Okay, good evening. I hope you are all doing well. Today we are going to be learning Maseches Avodah Zara, Daf Nun Hey and Nun Vav. We got through some thicker, difficult Gemaras, and then really the next Tkufa, as we'll soon see, we're going to be switching over a lot into more about Yain Nesech and Stam Yenam. We'll get there, but even if you scan over the next many blot, a lot of the blot are Baruch Hashem a lot shorter. Chaste Hashem. Although, of course, the rule of thumb is that the shorter the blot is, it might be great for Daf Yomi, but it's much harder in the Iyun world and in the Iyun landscape. Let us get started. Nun Ham and Aleph, 6 lines down. Shal Agrippus, Sar Tzava, the head of the army. Agrippus asked Rabban Gamliel, Ksib b'Toraschem, I don't understand. He asks a Shaila. The Gemara says, based on the pasuk, Hashem Elokecha Eish Ochla Hu Kel Kana. The Torah says that Hashem is a fire that consumes, and it seems that God is jealous. And Agrippus has a beautiful question based on the possibility, again, anthropomorphism, that God could be jealous. Who would you be jealous of, says Agrippus? Who are you jealous of? I'm not jealous of Bezos. I'm jealous of someone who's in my tax bracket who has a little bit more than me, right? I'm not jealous of a peasant. I'm only jealous of someone who's my equal. So says Agrippa to Rabban Gamliel, what does that mean? Hashem is jealous of a deity? Doesn't that mean that Hashem is machshiv the deity? That he's jealous? Beautiful. So says the Gemara, Rabban Gamliel always at his fingertips, ready to go. Amar lo La'adam shenasa isha al ishto. A man marries a second wife. Now, the first wife is looking at the second wife. Chashuva mimena. If he's marrying the second wife and she is significantly greater than the first wife, she's like, look, I get it. Ein miskana pa. She's not, I mean, I can't imagine she won't be jealous, but she's not, she gets it. She understands why the husband married this Givaldic woman, right? That's not what the Gemara says. It says she's chashuva. It doesn't say beautiful. Don't change the Gemara, Michael. She's chashuva. So the Gemara says that a woman who sees that her husband is marrying another wife, of course, it's going to be hard for her. But if she's in another league of chashivas, at least she could conceptualize. But pchusa mimenu miskanaba. But if he marries a woman that's less than her, what's her response going to be? Are you serious? That's who you married? So what the pasuk means is not jealousy; it's vengeance or anger. Agrippus understood the pasuk to be jealousy. It's not jealousy. It's this revolting response of, you're leaving me, says Hashem, for that rock? Are you serious? That's what's happening in the pasuk. It's not jealousy. It's this vengeance of, are you crazy town that you're machshav that ridiculous thing? So that's how he answered up Agrippus. It was great. Amar le Zunin le Rabbi Akiva. Zunin says to Rabbi Akiva the following: Libi v'libcha yada davodas kochavim les b'meshasha. You and I both know, says Zunin to Rabbi Akiva, Avodah Zara is dead in the water. There's no mamashas to them at all. And yet we do still see Gavri da'azli ki mispere, when they go into a base of Avodah Zara, when they're mispere, when they're broken. V'asu ki mitzamde, and they come out, and all of a sudden they're healed. We do see, right? The Gemara says we do see that sometimes they seem to get the healing that they ask for. Someone who believes in another religion, and they pray, and they seem to have gotten their prayers answered. So my time, says the Gemara, why is it that way? So it says the Rabbi Akiva back to Zunin, let me answer you up. Amar lo, there was a very trustworthy person. He was so trustworthy, let's call him Chaim. Chaim had a pikadon shop, and everyone would leave stuff by him, and everybody trusted him, so they would be mafkid without Edim. There was one particular guy who showed up, but when Ruvain came to leave his item by Chaim, he would always bring Edim. But and one time Ruvain was mafkid, and he forgot to bring Edim. Amra lo ishto. The wife of Chaim says, "No, bo nechaprenu. Let's chaperan. Let's take this guy's money, because he always shows up with Edim." And this time he didn't, so now he'll have no claim against us. Let's just take the money. So Amar Lo, this Chaim says to his wife, Anu novad es emunosenu, because this guy was ridiculous. We are going to that means we should ruin everything? Absolutely not. Afkach, the same is true by us. Yisurin, when a person has difficulties, b'shashim mishagrin son al ha'adam, when a person is broken, which was our case, right? Like this guy is broken and goes into a base of Avodah Zara. When a person is broken, mashbiin osan shelo telchu el biyom ploni. They have a promise from Shamayim that what they're going to get is going to happen on Yom Ploni. V'lo seitzu el biyom ploni, and their disease will go away on Yom Ploni. Uvashah Ploni is at a very specific time. The Al Yadei Ploni, using Dr. X and Nurse Y. The Al Yadei Sam Ploni, and based on a specific drug. So Kevan Sheigias Manan Latzeis, now the time has come for the person's disease to go away. Halach Zeh the base of Odavodas Kochavim. So I don't understand. Amr, we're going to say Yisurin Dinhu Shelo Neitze. Really, the guy is going into a base of Avodah Zara. We should say Klape Shmaya. No, we're not helping this guy. He's in a base of Avodah Zara. The Chosn V'Omrim, no. Kadosh Baruch Hu made a shvua that when a person goes through something difficult, the shvua is that there is a specific course, a course of action that needs to take place, and he's going to end up being healed. So now this guy wants to go to base of Avodah Zara. We should undo our shvua, the shvua of Hashem to get rid. No, same thing over here. Same thing over here. The Hainu Dam Rabbi Yochanan were 3/4 of the way down. Illnesses that are bad but trustworthy. Royim b'shlichusan, very bad on the front end when a person, God forbid, gets the ra when they get something bad. But v'ne'emanim b'shvu'asan, that they are still trustworthy, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world. 10 lines from the bottom. Amarle Rava Bar Yitzchak Rabbi Yehuda Ha'ika Beis Avodas Kochavim be'asrin. There is a house of idol worship in our neighborhood. That when the world has a drought, when we need rain, people get a dream, and here's what the dream says. I want you to kill someone, human sacrifice. I want you to kill someone, and then I'll make it rain. So they're obedient. They got this dream. They woke up in the morning and they killed somebody. This was not uncommon in previous historical religions and cults. This was not uncommon at all. And what did they do? Shachtu legavra v'asimitra. Yeah, that's what they did. So then they killed somebody, human sacrifice, and guess what happened? The rain started coming. Same shaila that we saw before. Amarle hashta Yahabashchivna, had I died. This is Rabbi Yehuda responding to Rabbi Bar Yitzchak's question. Lo amri l'chu hamilsa de amar Rab. Remember that Rabbi Yehuda learned under Rab. He said, had I died, I'm so glad you caught me before I died. Had I died, he said, I wouldn't have been able to tell you this amazing statement of Rab. That Hashem gave to other people as do a play on words with chalak. We made it smooth in their words, meaning we made it possible for the guy's world to look relatively real, even though there's no emes in it at all. Why? This is the pathway that certain people will be removed from the world. That for the scorners there will be scorning, and for the humble people there will be chen, there will be grace. And this is a famous line of the Gemara. If a person wants to go the route of Tuma, okay, Kadosh Baruch Hu says you're a big boy. Yeah, you get to decide what you want to do. You want to do the right thing. You want to go down if you want to go down the wrong path, I'm not going to stop you. You want to worship Avodah Zara? You get to choose what you want to do. But the opposite is also true. That Bala Taher Misayino. So this is a famous Gemara. It's also quoted in Maseches Shabbos on, I think, Daf Kuf Daled. Pretty sure that's where it is. Yeah. So the Gemara says that if a person wants to become Tahor, Misayin. So it's interesting. Look at the language. They're different. Bala Tame Poschenlo. I'm not going to help you, but I'll be Poseach. I'm going to open the door for you. I'm not going to help you become a Rasha. But if you want to do bad, I'll open the door, but I'm not going to draw you in. Masha'en came when it's balatayr, then you get siyata dishmaya, then you get help. So we take one step and he'll pull us two. And that is the model that we are probably all familiar with, that as we are really putting forth effort, we begin to see a shtickle siyata dishmaya, extra things happen. Next, we're moving on to a new Mishnah. It was interesting, the way Rabbi Reznik phrased it is that it's Ki'ilu, we learned one half of the Mishnah, now we're learning the second half of the Masechta. That was kind of how he phrased it, that we're going to focus, the Masechta, sorry, that we're going to be focusing on this. Ironically, there's only 20 blot left in the Masechta, we learned 54, so he doesn't mean half season the numbers way, but in topic. And now we're going to be talking about the wine systems that they used back in the day. And allow me briefly to describe what it looked like. There was an upper portion, a vat of sorts, where they would put the grapes in it and they would stomp on them and crush them. And then there was, like, let's say we had this square here. Then there was a lower vat, and there was a pipe leading from the lower vat. So you'd crush the grapes, they were slanted a little bit, the liquid would go into the pipe, drain down. There was a filter at the bottom of the pipe to catch sediment and seeds, and then the liquid would fall through. And then in that second lower vat would be the clean final wine. Now, they used to do this with their bare feet. Ew. But that was how they did it. We're going to actually learn a little bit about that today. Nobody seemed to be so alarmed by it. I just think that's cultural. It's kind of gross. No? Yeah, totally. They didn't shower. It was just... Anyways.
Jews had less than going during the Black Death because we showered on Fridays.
We had mikvah. Yeah, we had mikvah. Yeah,
exactly. Just the touch the mikvah saved like 80% of us.
Right.
It's disgusting.
Or the din of being rochitz mein chamin on our Shabbos, just taking a It's true, the offset.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah. Yes. It did save lives. That was that's where some of the libels came from, that we caused the bubonic plague and we caused the wells. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Says the Gemara, Lokhin gas beuta min ha'obe kochavim afal pishu notel biyado v'nosen letapuach. That if a goy were to squeeze a little bit of wine, which was the custom. Let's remember our structure: upper vat, tube, lower vat. What they used to do was kind of prime the tube. They would squeeze some grapes right at the entrance of the tube, and then that would just kind of go down. I don't know why they did it, but that was what they did. So if a goy does that, you can still take it. He takes it and then he puts it on the tapuach. The tapuach is the mound of grapes that's in the upper vat. We actually have the language of tapuach. Who remembers where? Anybody? We had this by the Trumas Hadeshin. There was a mound of ash, and we would take from the mound. They called it the tapuach there also. It's very... because I don't know why they picked tapuach, but it's a mound basically. So even if the goy put it there, this is a very important principle. Yayin nesech isn't always applicable. It only applied when the wine got into the bottom vat. So if at the top vat there was a goy there, no problem at all. That's not wine yet. Wine is when it gets to the bottom vat. In the upper vat, no problem at all. The guy can be involved. There's no din of yain.
I can stop the speed.
That's exactly correct. Exactly. In the upper vat.
One in the upper vat. The guy's the one that's stomping grips.
So that's not yain nesach.
Spills down into the bottom.
That's fine. But if that's what the Gemara says right here, is because it's all upper vat. But look at the next line, last line of the page. Yarad labor, if he goes to the lower one, mashe babor asur v'ashar mutter. In the lower vat, it would be asur. In the upper vat, it would be mutter.
To be clear, the goy, as long as he doesn't touch the lower vat, it's totally fine.
Correct. That's correct.
Call cheap labor.
Yeah. So that's what the Gemara says. That's part one of the Mishnah. And part two. Torchin im ha'oved kochavim bagas. The Jew and the goy, they can stomp on the grapes together. That's what the Gemara says over here. Turning to the top of non-handed bays. Avalo botzrenimo, but we can't harvest with the goy. We're going to unpack some of this over the course of the next little while. Yisrael shu ose betuma, when it comes to a Jew who might have made things betuma, lo dorchen velo botzrenimo. That's not allowed. If the Jew is tamei, then you cannot do anything with him. Aval molichin imo chavios lagas, but we can bring barrels to the gas. Umevin imo minagas, you can roll the barrels, but if the Jew is tamei, we're not going to work with him. Nachtom, a baker, nun hayamid beis, 4 lines down. Shehu ose betuma, who's making bread betuma. Lo lashin velo archin imo. You're not allowed to knead the dough, and you're not allowed to shape the dough with him. Aval molichin imo pas lepaltar, but you are allowed to bring bread to the bakery with him. You're not allowed to shape it. You're not allowed to make it, but you can transport the loaves, transport the dough. Okay, let's get into some of the pieces of the Gemara here. Amar Rav Huna, Yayin, Kevan shehischil lehimashech, osa yayin nesech. Once the wine starts to flow a little bit, so that is when we enter the space of yayin nesech. It's not really what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah seemed to not talk about when it started moving. So let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi on the Gemara, third of the way down, halfway down to Rashi. Sheschin limashech, shagas asuya b'madron. It was made on a slight slant. Umishashu nimshach mitzad ha'elyon letzad ha'tachton, karui yayin. So let's say in my example, we have our vat, the upper vat, but the upper vat is slanted a little bit. You start squeezing. The second the wine starts to drip down, yayin. That's what the Gemara says. That's what Rav Huna says. Asks the Gemara, Tanan, we have a problem. We just learned in our Mishnah that that's not the parameter. We learned in our Mishnah, Tanan, lokchem gas be'uta minove kochavim v'afal pishanat al biyadav v'nasan l'tapuach. We said that in the upper vat, even if he squeezes it a little bit, and even if he puts it back on, no concerns at all. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, the gas pekuka umaleya. One of these cases that we're talking about is a gas pekuka umalea, where the gas is completely filled. Rashi says the Gemara, begas pekuka umalea, pekuka, excuse me, not gas, the previous Rashi, shepakeku atzinor al pihabor, shelo yachol leired. So they in the upper vat there was wine, and they were pressing it, and the liquid was rising, and the wine couldn't go down the pipe into the lower pit. V'hi haisa kulam alea anavim v'lo nimshach bo yain v'lo zaz mimakomo elo b'makom shenischat sham omed. In that case, what would we say? No yain nesech. But if the tzino, if the pipe was open and things started flowing, that would be yain nesech. That's the distinction of Rav Huna. The Gemara says, Tashma, let's ask another question. Ve'ena osa yain nesech ad sheyered labor. Hold on one second. You, Rav Huna, were trying to say that when it starts flowing from the far side of the upper vat to the tube side, to the pipe side of the upper vat, that it's yain nesech. Mechatesi. We said over here that it doesn't do anything till it gets to the bore. Says the Gemara, that case too is also talking about hachanani begas pekukum alea. Let's try again. Question 3. Tashma. Yered labor. Mashe babor aser v'ashe'ar mutter. Again, same stylistics that we keep asking against Rav Huna. Rav Huna, you want to say that once the wine starts moving toward the pipe to go into the lower vat, that's when it becomes yayin. I'm sorry, that's not what it says. The Mishnah says not like that. The Mishnah says that whatever is in the bottom bore is aser v'hashe'ar, everything else, namely everything in the upper place, and seemingly everything in the tube is also not yayin nesech. So Amar Rav Huna lo kasha. Rav Huna says, don't worry. Kan b'mishnah rishona, kan b'mishnah achrona. It depends. We had two different learnings of this sugya. The Tanya. We have a brisa that speaks about this. This is actually a Tosefta. Birishona hayu omrim badad. Badad, of course, is an acronym for 3 halachos. They used to say badad, beis dalad dalad. Number 1, ein boter mim ovid kochavim begas. We're not allowed to harvest with a goy. She'asr ligrom tuma l'chulin sheberetz Yisrael. One approach is that we can't harvest with a goy. Ve'ein dorchen im Yisrael. A Jew is not allowed to, you can't work with a Jew who's crushing, if he's betuma, who's crushing the grapes. We can't be a part of that. One approach was taka against Rav Huna. That's why the questions are all valid. Because in this first approach, we didn't agree with Rav Huna, and we are allowed to press grapes with a goy in the upper vat, and we're not concerned about Rav Huna, who said that once the wine starts moving, we're in trouble. In version 1 in Mishnah Rishona, we don't agree with Rav Huna's approach, even from the Tanaim. But then v'chazru lomar, it should be dibab, dalid beis, as we'll soon see, and that's corrected here on the side in the Hagos Habach. It should not be dibad, it should be dibab. And says the Gemara, what are the 3 halachos in the Mishnah Achrona? Mishnah Rishona, we know we're rejecting Rav Huna. Mishnah Shnia agrees with him. Mishnah Achrona agrees. Here's the Dalid. Ein dorcheni move kochavim begas mishum de Rav Huna. Oh, now we're not allowed to be dorech in the upper vat, because perhaps the goy will the wine will start moving, and if the cock is open, then yain nesech. Rav Huna's right. That's the Dalit. And then we have two bays is coming up on the top of Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Ve'ein botzrenim Yisrael she'osa perosa betuma. You're not allowed to work with a yid who is making peros betuma. V'kol shekain she'ein dorchen pasha. You can't work with him not only for harvesting, but obviously that letter bays is ein botzrin. Here's another bays. Aval botzrin im ha'obe kochavim begas. You are allowed to harvest, to put it in the vat. Shemoter ligrom tuma lechulin be'eretz Yisrael, because this is a sugya we're not going to get into. It's really not our sugya about whether or not you can be gorim tuma in on chulin in Eretz Yisrael. Really, it's Eretz Yisrael. There's no. We're makbid. That's why we wash the tilas yadayim. But there's no tuma. I mean, there's all tuma, but we don't. We wash our hands. It's a minhag. Without that, we wouldn't even have even the smallest remnant of activities that are reminiscent of the Beis Hamikdash. They had the shiur, they would wash. So we do that now. It's because of srach tuma. That's why the poskim write, because of tuma, that when you wash netilas yadayim for mayim rishonim, your hands should be pointed upwards. Su'u yedechem kodesh, because when you pour, you don't want water to roll down here and then roll back up. Masha'en came, when you do mayim achronim, your fingers should be pointed down because you want to get all the melech sdomis off of our hands. So that interesting distinction. The appropriate way to wash your hands is ad perakaz oreya, until the wrist with your hands pointed up. Roll up your sleeves. Or you can do it some of the Haimish do and just pour it all over their jacket. You're welcome to do that as well. It's not my speed. I pull up my sleeve. That's when I'm being makbid. But we really should be washing up the ad perakaz oreya, and the fingers should be pointed upwards. Okay, let's go. Fourth line down, Nun Vav Amud Beis, starting our Nun Vav Amud Aleph, starting our second blot. Ve'ein osi yayin nesachad she'er the bor v'hatnan. Yayin, when does it become yayin? Misha yikpeh, when things start to float. So when it starts to settle, and the density of the skins is lighter than the density, all of a sudden you see things starting to come. That's when it becomes yayin.
Float in the top or float in the bottom?
You wouldn't know if it floated to the bottom. You couldn't tell. We're talking, oh yes, you're saying it started at the top? It didn't even cross my mind. I thought it was floating to the top, no?
Well, there's two.
Yeah, it's floating.
Well, it's not flowing to the bottom barrel.
Rashi says, Misha yikpeh lashon tzaf. It's floating. Yeah. I didn't look. It's floating. It's not falling. But I didn't even think about that until you said it. So I'm glad you said it. But that's what the Mishnah says. Yai Misha yikpeh. So that's a kasha on our Gemara, because the Gemara said that it's not yai nesech till it gets to the bottom vat. But here, where are they doing the crushing? In the top vat. So they crush. They're pressing down the grapes. They get out all the juice. And then all of a sudden, they start to float to the top. But if you hold that it becomes, potentially, that it could become yain nesech when things begin to float, that's not in the lower vat. That's in the upper vat. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rava, lo kasha, machlokes tanaim, ha Rabbi Akiva, ha Rabbanan. Depends who you hold like. So here we have a machlokes tanaim as to when we would say that there is yain nesech. Is it even in the upper vat? Is it even in the upper vat? Or is it, what's that?
Because according to this Mishnah, even after the wine sends into the cistern, it's not considered fully processed until the stump close to the surface.
Correct.
So even Maseches is when it's on the bottom of that, it still not doesn't become yayin until this happens.
Oh,
Sorry, say it again.
that's 100% correct. I totally hear that. But say it again anyway so you can hear it. I said it was talking about the upper vat.
Right.
That's not correct. It's talking about the lower vat. The Mishnah said it becomes yain nesech.
On the lower vat.
There is a filter, which we're going to talk about.
Good.
Good, fair question. That's going to come up. But you're correct. Talking about the lower vat, as we'll see in a moment. So
I believe you're on my scroll, but I don't know.
yeah, first name Art. That's the joke.
I don't know.
Art.
It's from that.
Arthur. So says the Gemara. That reminds me of someone who gave a shiur on the importance of using your Yiddish name, but everybody called him Steve. And this guy gave like a whole lumdish shiur with poskim. He's like, oh, he's a chashivos.
Scroll.
Yeah.
Third here.
Thank you for the correction, Rabbi Chin. So the Gemara says we're talking about yayin mishi yikpeh, that it's a stira. We said that it becomes yayin nesech in the lower bore if when it gets to the lower bore, and over here we have a later moment when things float. Amarav lo kasha bekiva rabbanon de Tanya. I'll just read it with the corrections. Yayin this is talking about Meiser. This Mari Makom here is talking about Meiser. If you look on the side, it's Mishnah from Bava Metzia, or a Bryce, I should say. Yayin Misha Yered Labor. It becomes Meiser when it goes into the bor. Rabbi Akiva Omer Misha Yikpeh. So you can see over here a correlation between the machlokas that we have by the world of Meiser brought back over to our world of Yain Nesech. And the party lines are Rabbi Akiva holds that the definition of Meiser is when things begin to float in the wine. So too it becomes Yain Nesech when things begin to float in the wine. We learn the two sigas equivalently, which is a shock a little bit because they're really not the same areas of halacha. But I think it has to do with, as some of the Rishonim here write about Gemar Malacha. That's what Rashi says over here. Yain Misha Yikpeh have a Gemar Malacha le'inyan Meiser le'asar bo shesias arai. So we're talking about Gemar Malacha. So the Gemar Malacha of wine as it relates to Yain Nesech is things floating according to Rabbi Akiva. The Gemar Malacha for Meiser as it relates to wine is things floating. That's his party line. The Gemara wants to know. Kifui de bor or kifui de chavis? Are we talking when Rabbi Akiva is talking about things floating? When the Brisa is talking about things floating, was that in the bor or was that in the barrel? So it says the Gemara Tashma Ditnan, another mistake. Yai mishiyikpe afal pishakafa kolet min hagas el yona min hatzinor v'shose shmamina kifui de bor ka'amrinan shmamina. The language that we see in this Mishnah is that afal pishakafa kolet min hagas el yona min hatzinor v'shose. You can collect; it can be dripping out of the faucet, out of the tube, no problem at all. That shows us we're not talking about a barrel because this Mishnah is talking about things floating while you're pulling from the system, which means we're not talking about the barrel, Shema Mina, that we're talking about that. Vatani Rav Zvid b'debei Rabbi Yoshaya. Hold on one second. Yain mishayered lebor v'yikpeh. We have a problem because the machlokas that we saw between the Tanakam and Rabbi Akiva above, which is 5 lines down, we said Har Rabbi Akiva Har Rabbanan. That's from the Brisa and Maseches Bava Metzia. So there we have a problem because the language here is different than the language there. The language that we have here from the Brisa of Rav Zvid Debei Rav Hoshaya was Yain Mishayered Labor V'Yikpeh. So the Tanakama said that it had to float. Rabbi Akiva Omer Mishayishle Bechavios. He said no, that is when it is drawn into the barrels. Different timing. So now we have a stira in Rabbi Akiva. Kasha Rabbanan Rabbanan, Kasha Rabbi Akiva. Because if you look at what was phrased 7 lines down, what did it say? 7 lines down, it said Yain Mishayered Labor. Tanakam held that way. Look at this one. Yain Mishayered Labor Ve'yikpeh. So we have a stira. The Gemara says not a stira. Tirtza nami lahach kamaisa hachi. Everything has to be like this one. That Yain Mishayered Labor Ve'yikpeh. Rabbi Akiva Omer Mishayishla B'chavias is talking about the second machlokas is correct. The Elamas Nisan Diktani, what about our Mishnah of Ein Osin Yain Nesech Ad Sheyered Labor? How does that fit with what we're talking about? You're talking about Chavios, you're talking about Mishiyikpeh, Lema Tulasa Tanaihi, that we have floating, and we have Yered Labor, and we have Chavios. There's 3-way machlokas about when. Is that correct? We know we saw 3 shitas, but could it be that one is the same as the other, or maybe one is an accident? So this is actually, we're going to get 2 answers right now. So here's answer number 1, low. Shiny yain nesech de'achmiru be'rabbanan. It's different by yain nesech. There aren't 3 parameters. There's only 2 parameters. We're just more makbid. We're just more makbid by the world of the rabbanan. Rashi fills in the gaps here. Dibra maskal shiny yain nesech. Last Rashi on the page of Abba Meiser ikar rabbanan. Ikar Rabbi Akiva is only 2 shitas. But over by Meiser, by yain nesech, we're even more chum. That's answer number 1. Turning to the top of Nun Vav Amid Beis. Mir Hashem will get to the top of Nun Zayin Amid Aleph. We will have learned 2 blot faster than any one in the last 2 weeks. Says the Gemara. Well, let's get to the end before I say that. Says the Gemara, Ulerava delo shanile. By him, there's no difference. The level of chumrah that we have by yayin nesech is not more than the level of chumrah that we have by meiser. They're equal. Therefore, mukim lake it's lasa tonight. Hitaka holds that there's a 3-way machlokas tanaim, a mirrored machlokas tanaim by meiser, just like we have by the world of yayin nesech, into the chavis, into the bor, misha yikpeh. And those are also the 3 Tanaim by our case of Yain Nesech as well. He doesn't hold that they're
It
done.
makes sense if you're trying to equate the 2.
Trying to equate the 2, but Yain Nesech is,
It's completely different.
No, I'm saying, no, yeah, they're very different, but the point is that there's a svara to be said that Yain Nesech is more chomer than Meiser, and therefore things should be different. But Rava viewed the equation of yain nesach to meiser just categorically. They are the same in halachic terms. And there's a good svar for this in the Rishonim, which is that we're chasing what Gemar Malacha means. We're not chasing which one's more chamor. We want to understand what Gemar Malacha is. So the Gemar Malacha in both cases is subject to this machlokas.
Very brisk, Rabbi.
He's a Brian, get the thick payas, He for sure had thick payas. Well, they never got haircuts, so probably did. Givaldik. We're on the second line of Nun Vav Amid Beis. The Gemara says, Masha bebor aser v'asha'ar motor. We saw this in the Mishnah. Amar Rav Huna lo shanu ela shelo hichsir gar gusni legas. When do we say that sha'ar motor? That's only true if you don't put that which was in the filter back into the upper one. So let's get our structures correct. Upper gas, tube, filter on the bottom of the tube, and all the wine that would drip through with its sediment and seeds would go through the tube. It would be caught by this filter, most of it, to your question earlier, most of it would be caught. What was left at the bottom was a relatively purified version of wine. Now, this principle that we just learned, that masha bebor aser, whatever's in the lower one would be yain nesech, but everything above is fine, that's only true if you don't take the contents of the filter and dump it back into the upper gas. As the Gemara says. Aval hichsir gargusni legas aser. Says the Gemara, gargusni gufa b'mai kamis mitzara meichatesi. Why did you even say that what's in the filter is aser? We should be concerned about what's in the lower vat. The wine came from the upper vat with its sediment, with its seed, went through the tube. The filter's hanging off the bottom of the tube, a metal basket. It's like fine chicken wire, a mesh basket. So all these things are dumping through. The liquid comes through, it picks up all the sediment and all the seed. But why is that? Why would that be usser? The Gemara says what's in the bore is usser. Well, why would the gargusni be usser? So here the Gemara teaches us about a very important halacha that comes up once a year on Pesach. Let's learn about this. The Gemara says, b'nitzuk. We're talking about a case of nitzuk. Nitzuk is where a liquid is connected. And what this means is, as far as on Pesach, we're makbid on this. That's why the coffee urn that we use throughout the year should not be used on Pesach. Because when you have a chametz cup during the year, so we're makbid on Pesach for nitzuk. So that means that if I have a chametz, let's say I'm making oatmeal and it's chametz. So when I open the spigot, the water is connected to my food, and the water, the status of that food goes back up and is metame, or in this case, makes the kli chametz. But who cares? Who cares? During the year, we're not makbid on. But on Pesach, we are, which is why we can't use our year round. It's because of the din of nitzok. But it only applies once a year. So the Gemara says, Shma minan nitzok chibor, seems to be from our Gemara. The fact that our Gemara assumes that the gargusni is, in fact, problematic for yain nesech implies that when the liquid is dripping down into the yain nesech, that the status of yain nesech jumps back up to the gargusni, to the mesh basket, because of nitzok. Seems that way from the Gemara.
That would imply that it's a consistent stream.
At least at one point, at any one point. In the beginning, there would be such a rush. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Not at the end. I said,
The koi's up there.
if the goy was up there and the water was, and the cock was open, you would anyways be done for. We're only talking about him touching the bottom vat. He's allowed to be in the top vat only if the cock is closed. Once it's open, so then had he been up there like Stan saying, he would have been usher anyways. So it says the Gemara 5 lines down, Kidatani Reb Chia, she pechasto tzluchiso. That's what the Gemara says, that we're not talking about a regular case of nitzok, but the filter that was at the bottom of the tube was hanging so low, it was in contact with the yain nesech directly, not through nitzuk, not through chibur, direct contact, and that's why it was problematic. So no raya that we would have nitzuk from here. Hachanami, we would apply the same principle. Reb Chia was talking about something else. His principle of shepchasto tzluchiso was talking about a Gemara on Daf Ayin Beis, which we'll get to, but here he's saying back in our case, Hachanami, why over here did we say that the gargusni was problematic? Because the basket was into the yain nesech, that's why. But no raya for nitzuk. But we do paskin that we're machmer for nitzuk on Pesach. That is lemaisa. Halfway down, Nun Vav Mebez. Hahu Yenuka, Detana Avodas Kochavim B'Shis Shnei. There was a child who learned Maseches Avodah Zara at the age of 6. It actually sounds like he learned it in 6 years. That's how it reads, but Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says 6, 7 lines from the bottom, B'Shis Shnin, Ben Sheish Shanim. What were you doing when you were 6 years old? So the Gemara says this kid was holding cup, a 6-year-old. I have a 6-year-old. My 6-year-old does not know Maseches Avodah Zara. And this kid was holding cup. Bo Minei, the rabbis went over to him. Zis, come here, I have a kasha on your learning. Ma'u lidrochim ha'oved kochavim begas. Could you imagine going home to the Shabbos table, asking the 6-year-old? So the Amar Lahu, he's like, I got this, no problem. Dorchinim ha'oved kochavim begas, no problem. Now we know what the qualification, the asterisk of, if it's the pekak is closed, fine. He's touching it with his hands. Kid responds, Did sayarna lahu liyade? We tied his hands behind his back. He's not using his hands. He's using his feet. Delicious. He's using his feet. Says the Gemara, Nisuch de regel lo shmei nisuch. When you're being menasech with your feet, that's not called nisuch hayayin. That's not the derech that they would serve in Avodah Zara, which is surprising after some of the things we've learned in this Masechta. But nevertheless, the Gemara seems to say that your feet, that's where we draw the line. You want to go defecate on an idol? No problem. Avodah Zara, no problem. You took off your shoes? This is where we say you've really done, you've gone too far, It's a funny line in the sand, but that's what the Gemara says. Another story. Hahu uvda dehava ben aharda. There was a story in Arda. The Dashu Yisrael v'Ovid Kochavim lahu chamra. There was a Yid and a Goy who were crushing grapes together to make wine. V'shehiyah Shmuel tlasa rigli. He waited 3 regalim to answer this question. Rashi tlasa rigli. Shoy miskapsin lishmoa drasha b'hilchos Pesach b'Pesach hilchos aseres b'atzeres b'hilchos chag b'chag. So he waited 3 regalim so that they could talk and learn. My time, why did he wait? Says the Gemara, bottom line of Nunvavim at base. If it's because Shmuel was thinking that that had we found a shita like Rav Nasan who was oser, then that I would have said that the wine that was nidrach by both the yid and the guy was going to be aser. The Tanya, where do we see this? Midado, if it was measured, a measuring stick of some kind, it would just measure the depth. Bein biyad, bein beregel yimacher. You're not allowed to drink it, but you can sell it. Where's Reb Nassan's shita that it's aser? Reb Nassan or biyad aser beregel mutter. That if they used his hand, it would be aser. So if that's what he was looking for, that the guy possibly used his hand, and therefore it's going to be aser, and that's why Shmuel waited. That okay, that's a possibility. But Amar da Amar Reb Nassan biyad. That's only true biyad, but beregel miyamar. Clearly, he holds that beregel is mutter. So if he was nidrach beregel with the guy, that should be mutter, even according to Rabbi Nassan, who's machmir. So that can't be it. Ella says the Gemara, we're gonna pause with this line here and stop at the next line. Ella de imishkach natana de shari kirib Shimon, that if we were to have found a shita like Rib Shimon, Rashi, kirib Shimon, de shari maga shel oved kochavim shalonis kavin lenasech. Wow, what a huge kula that would completely undo yayin nesech when it's not bechavana. Rashi, let's read it again. Rashi says, kirib Shimon, de shari maga shel oved kochavim. If a guy touches wine, shalonis kavin lenasech, it is not yayin nesech. Today you can, because most people are not Baalei Avodah Zara. Called the Parish Meruba Parish. The average person is not a Baalei Avodah Zara. And even if they are, when they open the wine, they're not like turning the corkscrew and they're like, oh, this is going to be Givaldik, Baal Peor, we're going to pour it on the bull, So most people are not. So if he would have found that heter, says the Gemara, Isharya Efilu B'Shasiya. Huge kula. Huge kula. That's why Shmuel was waiting to find out how we paskin. We'll pause right here. Emir Hashem on Shabbos. We'll pick up with 2 more blots, starting with a Uvda, 6 lines down on Nunzat and Amad Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.